At 2:13 a.m., the old military radio on Ethan Cole's kitchen counter turned itself on and whispered a dead man's voice. Rector at first. The German shepherd jerked awake beside the wood stove, ears pinned flat, amber eyes fixed on the dark hallway leading deeper into the cabin. Then came the static. Low. Vet. Breathing through the speaker like someone trapped underground. Ethan froze halfway through pouring coffee. The mug slipped from his hand and shattered across the pine floorboards. Because the voice buried inside that static belonged to Staff Sergeant Noah Mercer, and Noah Mercer had been dead for 11 months. The radio crackled again. Cole. A burst of interference swallowed the rest. Rex didn't bark. That was the part Ethan would remember later. Any other dog would have exploded into noise. Any trained K9 would have lunged toward the sound. But Rex only stared, perfectly still, like something inside him had stopped moving long ago. Outside the Montana cabin, snow drifted softly through the trees, silver under the moonlight. Wind pushed against the windows with a slow, mournful whistle, carrying the scent of pine and distant ice. Somewhere far off, a branch snapped in the forest. Ethan stepped closer to the radio, pulse climbing hard in his throat. The unit was 20 years old. This have done. Scratch casing. A faded Marine Corps sticker peeling near the antenna. He hadn't plugged it in for months. Slowly, he reached toward it. Static hissed louder. Then came 3 sharp clicks. Morse-like. Intentional. Rex lowered his head and released a sound Ethan had never heard before. Not a growl. Not a whine. Something smaller. Almost human. Rex, Ethan whispered. The dog backed away from the radio immediately. That scared him more than the voice. Rex had once charged through live gunfire to pull Ethan from a collapsed checkpoint outside Kandahar. He had bitten through a suicide vest trigger cable with blood running from his own shoulder. Fear did not belong in that dog. Yet now the shepherd trembled beside the stove, eyes locked on the speaker as if waiting for it to say something worse. The cabin lights flickered once. Ethan grabbed the radio and twisted the volume knob down. The static didn't change. He killed the power switch. Still nothing changed. The speaker continued breathing softly into the room. Cold prickled down his arms. No, he muttered under his breath. No damn way. Then the voice returned. Clearer this time. Don't let him hear it. Ethan's blood went thin. The voice was Noah's. Same rough edge. Same slow Texas drawl worn down by cigarettes and desert dust. For one impossible second, Ethan smelled Afghanistan again. Burned diesel. Hot metal. Wet sand after mortar fire. His stomach tightened violently. Rex suddenly turned and walked toward the back door. Slow. Stiff-legged. Not fleeing. Avoiding. Ethan followed him with his eyes. The shepherd stopped near the mudroom entrance where his old tactical collar still hung from a wall hook untouched. A bronze K9 tag clinked softly against the wood as the dog brushed past it. Rex sat beneath the hook without looking up. Silent. Always silent now. 11 months earlier, the dog had barked so hard during a tunnel operation that blood vessels burst in his throat. Then, according to the veterinarians at Fort Harrison, something changed. No damage to the vocal cords. Non neurological el trauma. No physical explanation. He simply stopped. No barking. No warning sounds. No playful noise in his sleep. Just silence. Like a soldier refusing to speak about war. Ethan swallowed hard and looked back at the radio. Static rolled through the cabin again. Then came another sound beneath it. Metallic. Rhythmic. Chains dragging slowly across concrete. Rex immediately flattened himself against the floorboards. Ethan's heart began hammering now, because he remembered that sound too. Tunnel 9, Kandahar Province. The collapse. The darkness. Noah screaming somewhere beneath stone and smoke while the radio signal faded into static. Ethan shut his eyes tightly. Stop, he whispered to nobody. The radio answered with one final burst of interference, so violent it rattled the speaker grill. Then silence crashed over the cabin all at once. Complete. Heavy. The wood stove crackled softly. Snow brushed the roof. Ethan stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen while cold coffee spread across his socks from the shattered mug. Slowly, carefully, he looked toward Rex. The shepherd had not moved, but tears glistened along the fur beneath his eyes. And for the first time in nearly a year, Ethan realized something that made his stomach turn cold. Rex wasn't refusing to bark. He was terrified of what might answer back. The cabin stayed quiet for almost 3 full minutes after the radio died. Too quiet. Ethan could hear the faint ticking of cooling pipes inside the walls and the slow scrape of tree branches brushing against the roof outside. Rex still lay flat near the mudroom door, chest barely moving, eyes fixed on the old radio, sitting dead on the kitchen counter. Snow drifted harder beyond the windows now, thick white ribbons swirling through the dark pines surrounding the property. Ethan forced himself to breathe evenly. There had to be an explanation. Electrical interference, old batteries, stress, lack of sleep, anything except what his mind kept trying to become. He stepped toward the counter carefully, boots crunching over broken ceramic from the coffee mug. The radio sat exactly where he left it, dull and harmless beneath the dim yellow light hanging over the sink. Ethan reached for it again. His fingers hesitated inches away. Then he noticed something that had not been there before. Mud. Fresh mud pressed into the speaker grill. He frowned immediately. The cabin floor was dry except near the back entrance, and he had not touched the speaker since bringing the unit home from storage last winter. Slowly, he lifted the radio closer to the light. Tiny streaks of dark brown dirt clung deep inside the vents like someone with wet hands had gripped it recently. Ethan turned cold. Rex suddenly stood behind him, silent, watching. The dog moved closer than before, nose twitching toward the radio, but he refused to touch it. Ethan swallowed hard and flipped the unit over. Something rattled inside. His pulse climbed again. He grabbed a screwdriver from the junk drawer and removed the back panel with shaking fingers. Dust drifted onto the counter. Inside the battery compartment sat a folded piece of paper stained with moisture and age. Ethan stared at it without breathing. He knew that paper. Military waterproof field stock. The kind issued overseas. His throat tightened as he unfolded it carefully. Coordinates. One line. Handwritten in black marker. 34.218 north. 69.102 east. Kandahar province. Tunnel 9. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. No, he whispered. Rex backed away instantly the moment Ethan spoke the tunnel name out loud. The shepherd lowered his ears and disappeared into the hallway, leading toward the bedroom. Ethan heard his nails scraping nervously against the hardwood floor. Then another sound came from deeper inside the cabin. A soft metallic clink. Ethan looked up sharply. The hallway was dark except for pale moonlight leaking through the bedroom window at the far end. Rex. No response. He grabbed the flashlight hanging beside the refrigerator and moved slowly toward the hallway. The beam cut through drifting dust and old shadows. Every step creaked beneath his weight. Halfway down the hall, the smell hit him first. Wet earth. Cold stone. The exact smell buried inside his memory from Afghanistan tunnels after rainstorms. Ethan stopped walking immediately. His pulse pounded against his ears now. The smell should not have existed here. Not inside a sealed Montana cabin in the middle of winter. Then the flashlight beam landed on the bedroom floor. Muddy paw prints. Fresh ones, but not Rex's. These prints were smaller, narrower, and they began in the middle of the hallway. Not at the door, not at a window. Ethan stared in disbelief as the tracks crossed the floorboards and disappeared beneath his bed. A sudden burst of static exploded behind him from the kitchen radio, loud enough to make him jump. Rex let out a sharp, choking breath from the bedroom corner, but still did not bark. Ethan spun around toward the sound. The radio had turned itself back on. Through the static came a distant scraping noise, followed by one clear sentence. He never left the tunnel. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. The voice was not Noah this time. It was his own, older recording quality, distorted, like playback from damaged combat audio. Static swallowed the words again. Ethan rushed back into the kitchen and grabbed the radio violently. "Who is this?" he shouted. "What do you want?" Nothing answered except the soft hiss of dead air. Then the frequency shifted on its own. A low military emergency tone pulsed through the speaker. 3 slow beeps repeating over and over. Ethan recognized it instantly. Lost personnel beacon. Search and recovery signal. His stomach twisted hard, because there was only one reason a recovery beacon would still be transmitting after 11 months. Somewhere beneath all that snow and silence and buried memory, somebody had never been found. The recovery beacon kept pulsing through the radio every 7 seconds. Slow, mechanical, patient. Ethan stood frozen in the kitchen while snow hammered softly against the cabin windows and the old speaker hissed with static between each signal burst. Rex had retreated to the far corner of the living room now, pressed against the wall beneath the mounted deer antlers Ethan never bothered taking down after buying the place. The shepherd looked exhausted suddenly, as if the sound itself drained something from him. Ethan grabbed the folded coordinates again and stared at the numbers under the kitchen light. Tunnel 9, Kandahar Province. A tunnel the Marine Corps officially sealed after the collapse almost a year ago. A tunnel where Noah Mercer was declared killed in action after search teams found nothing except damaged equipment and blood-soaked concrete. Yet somebody had hidden these coordinates inside Ethan's radio recently. Somebody wanted him to remember. The beacon pulsed again. Ethan moved fast now. He crossed into the bedroom and yanked open an old green military footlocker at the end of the bed. Dust rose into the cold air. Inside lay pieces of another life. Desert uniforms, burned notebooks, sand-coated gloves, Noah's photograph tucked beside a folded American flag. Ethan reached beneath the stack and pulled out a rugged military tablet wrapped in cloth. Dead battery. He plugged it into the wall beside the dresser with trembling hands. Behind him, Rex suddenly stood up. The dog stared toward the bedroom window, ears high for the first time all night. Not fear this time. Alertness. Ethan turned. Slowly, beyond the frosted glass, deep in the tree-line behind the cabin, a light moved between the pines. One flash, then darkness. Ethan's pulse climbed instantly. The property sat nearly 12 miles outside the nearest town. Nobody came up this mountain after midnight in winter, especially not during a storm. The light appeared again. Closer now. White beam cutting silently through falling snow before vanishing behind the trees. Rex backed away from the window immediately. Ethan grabbed the 12-gauge shotgun mounted beside the closet door out of instinct more than intent. The flashlight beam outside stopped moving altogether. Silence swallowed the woods again. Then the radio crackled from the kitchen. Recovery signal active. A computerized voice announced softly through the static. Personnel beacon battery life remaining 14 hours. Ethan stared toward the kitchen in disbelief. 14 hours. Military emergency beacons did not reactivate themselves after nearly a year. Their batteries died within days unless manually reset, which meant somebody had turned it back on recently. Or worse, somebody had been carrying it this entire time. Rex began pacing now. Fussed, nervous, nails clicking sharply against hardwood. Ethan had not seen him move like that since Afghanistan. The shepherd stopped suddenly beside the front door and looked back at Ethan. Waiting. You want me to follow you? Ethan whispered. Rex stared at him hard enough to answer yes. Then came another sound outside. Not the wind. Footsteps. Slow crunches through deep snow, circling somewhere near the porch. Ethan killed the bedroom light instantly. Darkness flooded the cabin except for pale moonlight and the dim green glow of the charging tablet screen. The footsteps stopped. Ethan barely breathed. Rex stood perfectly still near the front door, body rigid, tail low. Then a shadow passed across the living room window. Human height. Gone in a second. Ethan moved quietly toward the curtains and pulled them aside just enough to look outside. Empty porch. Snow drifting sideways beneath the porch lamp. But there on the railing sat something that had not been there minutes earlier. A marinco. Challenge coin. Tarnished silver. Black eagle insignia worn smooth with age. Ethan opened the door carefully, cold mountain air rushing instantly into the cabin, carrying the smell of snow and pine sap. The coin rested alone beneath a layer of fresh snowflakes. Ethan picked it up slowly. His stomach tightened the second he saw the engraving on the back. N.M. Noah Mercer. Ethan's throat went dry. He had buried that coin with Noah's memorial flag 11 months ago. Rex suddenly released a low, strained sound behind him. Not quite a bark, more like pain forcing its way upward. Ethan turned fast. The shepherd stood staring into the darkness beyond the porch steps, focused on something Ethan still could not see. Then, from deep inside the forest, came the faint crackle of a radio speaker drifting through the storm. "Cole," Static swallowed the rest. "You left me there." Ethan stopped breathing, because the voice had not come from the cabin radio this time. It had come from somewhere alive in the woods. The voice vanished into the storm as suddenly as it came. Ethan stood frozen on the porch, snow collecting across his shoulders while the challenge coin burned cold in his palm. Beyond the tree-line, darkness swallowed everything again. No flashlight, no movement, just endless black pines swaying under the wind. Rex remained inside the doorway behind him, trembling hard now, eyes locked on the woods, as though he recognized something Ethan still could not understand. The old radio crackled softly from the kitchen counter. 3 slow beacon pulses echoed through the cabin. 14 hours remaining. Ethan shut the front door and leaned against it heavily. His breathing had become uneven without him noticing. He looked down at Noah's coin again. The edges were scratched exactly the same way Ethan remembered from deployment. One deep nick near the eagle insignia where Noah dropped it against a Humvee outside Kandahar after losing a card game to the squad medic. Tiny details no stranger could fake, which meant someone had either dug through Noah's memorial burial case or Noah himself had touched this coin recently. Neither possibility made sense. Ethan crossed back into the kitchen while Rex followed several feet behind, staying unusually close to the walls. The shepherd would not take his eyes off the windows. Snowlight flickered softly across his sable coat as the storm deepened outside. Ethan grabbed the charging tablet from the bedroom and powered it on. The screen glowed weakly at first before loading old archived mission files from overseas. Dust and static danced across the cracked display. Tunnel 9. Operation Black Lantern. Casualty report sealed under restricted military classification. Ethan hesitated before opening it. His chest tightened immediately. He had avoided these files for 11 months. Avoided the dreams. Avoided the guilt. Avoided the final memory of Noah disappearing beneath collapsing stone while Rex barked himself, raw, trying to reach him. The beacon pulsed again from the radio. 7 seconds apart now. Faster than before. Ethan opened the report. Most of the pages remained heavily redacted. Black bars covered coordinates, personnel movements, and recovery details. But one line near the bottom had not been blacked out. Final recovery suspended due to secondary tunnel instability and unverified audio transmission. Ethan stared hard at the sentence. Unverified audio transmission. He scrolled lower. Attached beneath the report sat an audio file time-stamped 4 hours after the collapse. His stomach dropped. He did not remember this recording existing. Slowly, Ethan pressed play. Static filled the cabin first, then distant voices. Marines coordinating evacuation procedures. Dust alarms. Equipment noise. Suddenly, Rex reacted violently behind him. The shepherd backed into the kitchen table hard enough to rattle the dishes. Ethan spun around. "Easy," he whispered, but Rex was staring at the tablet screen itself. Not the sound, the screen. Ethan looked back down. A figure had appeared frozen in one grainy frame of recovered helmet footage attached to the file. Deep inside the collapsed tunnel behind drifting dust stood a silhouette holding a flashlight. Tall, broad-shouldered, marine build. Ethan's blood turned cold. The timestamp showed the image captured almost 3 hours after Noah had officially been declared dead. Then the recording changed. A voice emerged beneath the static. Weak, strained. If anyone gets this, Ethan stopped breathing. Noah, older somehow, exhausted. Tunnel flooded below, Sector 3. I cannot. Static swallowed several words. Tell Ethan. Another burst of interference cracked violently through the speaker. Rex suddenly let out a broken, choking noise and rushed from the kitchen entirely. Ethan heard him slam into the bedroom door down the hall. The recording continued. He was right about the signal. Ethan froze. Signal. The word hit him harder than anything else, because Ethan had never told investigators about the signal they heard before the collapse. Neither had Rex's handlers. That detail existed nowhere in the official reports. Noah's breathing rasped faintly through the speakers now. "Do not let him hear," Static screamed, suddenly, so loud the tablet shut off completely. Silence crashed over the cabin again. Ethan sat motionless at the kitchen table, while snow battered the windows harder by the minute. His hand shook now, not from fear alone, from realization. Somebody had hidden this file. Somebody had erased it from the official archive. And somebody wanted Ethan to find it tonight before the beacon battery died forever. Then came a sound that truly broke something inside him. From a bedroom down the hall, Rex began scratching desperately at the floorboards beneath the bed. Not playful scratching, not nervous pacing, digging, fussed, panicked, like there was something buried under the cabin that the dog had spent 11 months trying not to remember. The scratching grew louder with every second, would splinter beneath Rex's paws somewhere inside the bedroom, while the storm outside swallowed the mountain in white noise. Ethan rushed down the hallway, flashlight beam shaking across the walls. The smell hit him before he reached the doorway again. Vet dirt. Rushed. Cold air that did not belong inside a sealed cabin. Rex was half under the bed now, claws tearing into the old floorboards with desperate force. His entire body trembled violently. Ethan dropped to one knee beside him. "Rex, stop." The dog ignored him completely. Another plank cracked loose beneath his paws. Then Ethan saw it, a narrow black gap under the floor. Air rising from below, ice cold. Ethan's chest tightened immediately because he remembered something he had forgotten for years. When he bought the cabin after leaving active duty, the previous owner mentioned an old storm cellar beneath the property built sometime in the 1950s. Ethan never opened it, never even found the entrance. Rex backed away suddenly the moment the opening widened enough to reveal darkness below. The shepherd pressed himself against the wall again, panting silently. Ethan grabbed the flashlight and pried the loose board aside fully. Beneath the bedroom floor sat a rusted metal hatch covered in chains and dirt. Fresh dirt, recently disturbed. Ethan stared in disbelief. Someone had opened this recently. The chain wrapped around the handle hung loose, not locked. The old radio crackled faintly from the kitchen again. Battery life remaining 12 hours. Ethan looked toward the hallway, then back at the hatch. His instinct screamed at him to leave the cabin immediately. Call the sheriff. Call the Marines. Call anyone else. But another part of him understood something terrible already. Whatever waited below, that hatch was connected to Noah. Connected to the signal. Connected to the reason Rex had carried silence home from Afghanistan like a wound nobody could see. Ethan pulled the hatch open slowly. The hinges groaned deep beneath the floorboards. Cold, damp air rushed upward, carrying the smell of wet stone and mildew. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness beneath the cabin. Rex whimpered softly behind him and refused to move closer. Ethan grabbed the flashlight tighter and descended alone. The steps creaked under his boots. Dust drifted through the beam. Water dripped faintly somewhere below. The deeper he went, the colder the air became until every breath fogged pale in front of him. At the bottom sat a small concrete room lined with old shelves and rotting canned food left decades earlier. But none of that held Ethan's attention. Against the far wall stood a military field desk illuminated by a single battery. Lanterns still glowing weakly yellow. Fresh batteries. Fresh footprints in the dirt floor. Someone had been living down here. Ethan approached slowly. His pulse hammered louder with every step. On the desk sat a stack of papers, military maps, and a satellite radio connected to a portable beacon transmitter. The same recovery signal, still blinking steadily into the night. Ethan stopped breathing. Beside the transmitter lay a faded green jacket folded neatly over the chair. Marine issue. Name tape still attached. Mercer. Ethan's knees nearly gave out beneath him. He reached toward the jacket carefully, like touching it might wake something sleeping. The fabric felt cold and damp, but real beneath his fingers. Beneath the jacket sat Noah's old notebook. Ethan opened it slowly. Most pages contained coordinates, sketches, fragmented notes written in increasingly shaky handwriting. But one page near the center made Ethan freeze completely. Tunnel 9 was never empty. Ethan read the line twice. Then again. Beneath it, Noah had written another sentence darker and harder into the paper, as if carved there under fear. The signal was already active before we arrived. Ethan's mouth went dry. A sudden noise echoed above him. Floorboards creaking upstairs. Ethan snapped his head toward the staircase instantly. Someone was moving inside the cabin. Slow footsteps crossing the living room overhead. Rex released a deep, strained whine from upstairs, unlike anything Ethan had heard since the war. Then came a sound that turned his blood cold. A second radio voice drifted faintly through the floorboards above him. Calm. Male. Familiar. Ethan. The voice paused beneath layers of static. Do not let Rex hear the recording. Ethan stared upward in horror. Because this time the voice did not belong to Noah. It belonged to Ethan himself. The flashlight nearly slipped from Ethan's hand. His own voice drifted faintly through the ceiling above him, warped beneath layers of static and age. Do not let Rex hear the recording. Every hair along Ethan's arms rose at once. Upstairs, floorboards creaked slowly across the living room. One step at a time. Heavy, deliberate, then silence again. Ethan stood frozen inside the cellar. Noah's jacket clenched tightly in his fist while the weak lantern flickered across the concrete walls. His mind tried desperately to force logic into something impossible. Old recordings. Trauma. Hallucinations born from guilt and exhaustion. But the satellite beacon on the desk was real. The footprints in the dirt were real. The jacket was real. And somewhere above him, something had just spoken using his own voice. Rex released another strained cry upstairs. Ethan moved instantly. He rushed toward the staircase 2 steps at a time, flashlight beam bouncing violently off the walls. Halfway up, he noticed something carved into the wooden stair rail. Deep scratch marks. Fresh. Not from tools. Claw marks. Rex had tried to get down here before. Repeatedly. The realization hit Ethan like ice water. The dog had not been afraid of the cellar. He had been trying to keep Ethan away from it. Ethan pushed through the hatch into the bedroom. Empty. Cold moonlight stretched across the torn floorboards while snow hissed softly against the windows outside. The cabin lights flickered weakly. Rex. Ethan whispered. No answer came. Then the radio in the kitchen crackled loudly enough to shake the silence apart. Ethan rushed down the hallway. The old military radio now sat beside the satellite transmitter from the cellar. Ethan stopped dead. He had not brought the transmitter upstairs. His pulse thundered violently. Slowly, he scanned the room. Front doors still locked. Snow untouched outside the porch windows. Nobody there. Yet the transmitter blinked steadily beside the radio, as if someone had placed it there moments earlier. Then he saw Rex. The shepherd sat beside the kitchen table, staring directly at the tablet screen, still glowing faintly where Ethan left it. On the screen, the paused helmet camera image remained frozen on the shadowy figure standing deep inside Tunnel 9 after the collapse. Ethan moved closer slowly. Rex's eyes never left the screen. What are you trying to show me? Ethan whispered. The dog stood carefully and nudged the tablet with his nose. The video timeline shifted backward several seconds accidentally beneath. The pressure. Then the frame changed. Ethan froze instantly. The flashlight inside the tunnel illuminated the figure more clearly this time. Not Noah. Ethan himself. Ethan stared in disbelief. Same build. Same helmet markings. Same damaged shoulder patch from his unit. His chest tightened painfully. That is impossible, he muttered. He remembered leaving the tunnel before the second collapse. He remembered Rex dragging him toward the surface while Noah stayed behind. He remembered medics, evac helicopters, recovery reports. But suddenly fragments inside his memory began shifting out of place like ice cracking beneath weight. Small details he had buried. Noah shouting something through the dust. Rex barking uncontrollably. And another sound beneath it all. Ethan's own voice screaming. The radio hissed again. Then the hidden audio file restarted by itself. Static rolled softly through the cabin before the recording cleared. Ethan heard himself breathing hard through a damaged headset microphone. Heard rocks falling somewhere nearby. Heard Rex barking wildly in the distance. Then came Noah's voice close beside him. Calm despite everything. Listen to me, Ethan. You hit your head hard. You are confused. Ethan stopped breathing. The recording continued. You cannot go back down there. Another collapse rumbled faintly through the audio. Ethan's own voice answered weakly. Disoriented. There is somebody else still alive. Noah exhaled shakily. No, brother. There is not. Silence filled the cabin except for the storm outside and the soft hiss of the radio. Ethan felt his knees weakening beneath him. The recording jumped forward several seconds. Then Noah spoke again, softer now. Rex heard it too. Ethan looked slowly toward the shepherd. Rex stared back at him with exhausted amber eyes full of something deeper than fear. Grief. The audio crackled violently before Noah whispered the sentence Ethan had forgotten for 11 months. The signal was coming from you. Ethan's heartbeat stopped cold. Suddenly the memory returned all at once. Tunnel 9 collapsing around them. Dust thick as smoke. Ethan trapped beneath debris after striking his head. Disoriented. Hearing. Voices that were not there. Following a phantom radio signal deeper underground while Rex barked desperately, trying to stop him. Noah had gone back for him. Noah had pulled him free. Noah had stayed behind when the second collapse sealed the lower tunnel forever. Ethan staggered backward against the counter as tears burned his eyes. The signal, the voices, the whispers and the static. They had never come from Noah. They had come from Ethan himself after the concussion damaged something inside his mind. Rex knew it. That was why the dog had stopped barking. Because the last thing Rex ever heard before Noah disappeared beneath the tunnel was Ethan screaming at shadows that never existed. Ethan could not feel his hands anymore. The kitchen around him seemed distant suddenly, blurred beneath the weak overhead light and the constant whisper of snow against the cabin walls. The radio continued hissing softly beside the transmitter, but now the sound felt smaller somehow. Human. Broken. Not haunted. Just wounded. Rex remained motionless near the table, watching Ethan carefully as though waiting to see whether the man would finally understand what the dog had carried alone all this time. Ethan lowered himself slowly into the chair beside the counter. His knees no longer trusted him. The old wood creaked beneath his weight while fragments of memory continued forcing themselves back into place with painful clarity. Tunnel 9. The collapse. The panic. He remembered Noah grabbing him by the shoulders through the dust while Ethan fought to go deeper underground, chasing voices only he could hear. He remembered Rex barking so violently the sound echoed through the tunnel walls. Not warning enemies. Warning Ethan. Warning everyone. Tears blurred Ethan's vision. Oh God, he whispered hoarsely. What did I do? Rex took one cautious step closer. Ethan looked at him fully for the first time that night. The shepherd appeared older now than he had only hours earlier. Gray spreading along his muzzle beneath the kitchen light. Exhaustion buried deep behind those amber eyes. 11 months. The dog had lived 11 months, carrying a truth nobody else could see. Ethan remembered every veterinarian appointment after they returned stateside. Every specialist insisting the dog suffered from trauma-induced mutism. Every marine handler recommending retirement therapy. But Rex had never been sick. He had been grieving. Worse than grieving. Protecting. The realization hollowed Ethan out completely. Rex had stopped barking because barking was the sound tied to the moment Noah disappeared forever. The final sound inside that tunnel before silence buried everything. Ethan covered his face with trembling hands. You try to stop me, he whispered through uneven breaths. You kept trying. Rex moved closer again. Slow. Careful. Like approaching a wounded soldier. Then the dog rested his head gently against Ethan's knee. The contact broke something open inside him. Ethan bent forward immediately, one hand gripping the thick fur around Rex's neck while tears finally spilled freely onto the shepherd's coat. Outside, the storm deepened across the mountain. Wind moaned softly through the pines surrounding the cabin, while snow buried the porch rail inch by inch beneath pale moonlight. Somewhere in the darkness, distant tree limbs cracked under the weight of ice. But inside the kitchen, neither Ethan nor Rex moved for a long time. The radio suddenly emitted another pulse from the recovery beacon. 11 hours remaining. Ethan lifted his head slowly. The transmitter still blinked steady green beside Noah's jacket folded across the chair. "Why now?" Ethan whispered aloud. "Why send this now?" Rex's ears twitched immediately toward the hallway leading back to the bedroom. Ethan followed the movement with his eyes. Then he heard it, faint, almost buried beneath the storm. A dripping sound somewhere inside the walls. Slow water droplets echoing through hidden pipes or old wood. Except the rhythm sounded wrong. Too deliberate. Ethan stood carefully. Rex tensed instantly beside him. The dripping came again. 3 drops. Pause. 3 more. Ethan's stomach tightened. Morse code. He moved toward the hallway while Rex stayed pressed close against his leg this time. Neither wanted separation anymore. The sound led them back toward the open floor hatch beneath the bedroom. Cold air still drifted upward from the cellar, carrying the scent of wet earth and old stone. Ethan shined a flashlight downward. Nothing moved below, yet the dripping continued faintly from somewhere deeper than the storage room. A second space beneath the cellar perhaps. Hidden drainage tunnels under the mountain. Then Ethan noticed something he missed before. Another notebook page pinned beneath Noah's field desk downstairs. The paper trembled slightly beneath the cold draft. Ethan descended slowly with Rex, following only halfway this time before stopping on the stairs. The shepherd refused to go lower. Ethan reached the desk and unfolded the paper carefully. His chest tightened immediately at the handwriting. Noah's, rushed and uneven near the end. If Ethan remembers the signal, do not let him return below. Ethan stared hard at the final word. Below. Not tunnel. Not cellar. Below. Then he noticed a rough sketch beneath the warning. A hand-drawn map of the cabin foundation. One section circled beneath the cellar floor itself. Ethan looked slowly toward the concrete beneath his boots. His pulse climbed again. The dripping sound came once more. Louder now, directly underneath him. Rex suddenly released a sharp, strained cry from the staircase and backed away so fast he nearly slipped on the wooden steps. Ethan spun toward him in alarm. The dog stared at the cellar floor with pure terror flooding his eyes. Then the radio upstairs crackled violently through the ceiling above them. One final hidden recording began playing on its own. Noah's exhausted voice filled the cabin softly through layers of static. Ethan, if you are hearing this, it means the signal found you again. Noah's voice drifted softly through the ceiling speakers above the cellar, worn thin by static and time. Ethan, if you're hearing this, it means the signal found you again. The recording crackled weakly between each sentence. Ethan stood motionless beside the desk, while cold air moved through the underground room like distant breathing. Rex remained halfway up the stairs trembling, so hard his tags rattled faintly against each other. Noah continued, I did not understand it at first either. The tunnel was already transmitting before we entered. Not military, not enemy, something older, repeating the voices of anyone trapped long enough to hear it. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The whispers, the false radio calls, the phantom voices inside Tunnel 9. They had never been ghosts, never supernatural, just damaged sound waves trapped deep underground, bouncing through collapsed chambers until exhausted minds began hearing what they feared most. Noah coughed harshly somewhere inside the old recording. The deeper we went, the more it copied us. Ethan gripped the edge of the desk tightly. His flashlight beam shook across the concrete floor while pieces of truth finally settled into place. The signal had mimicked voices. It learned patterns. It repeated memories back through static until confusion became panic. Ethan remembered hearing his mother's voice briefly inside the tunnel before the collapse. A woman dead nearly 15 years. At the time, he thought it was stress. Now he understood. The mountain itself had become an echo chamber of grief. Noah's breathing weakened in the recording. You hit your head during the first collapse. You kept chasing the voices. Rex knew something was wrong before any of us. Ethan looked toward the staircase where the German shepherd stood, frozen in shadow. Loyal even now, Noah continued softly. If Rex ever refuses a sound, trust him. Silence followed for several seconds, except for faint static rolling beneath the recording. Then Noah spoke one final time. Do not dig below the cellar. The tape ended abruptly. Upstairs, the storm howled harder around the cabin, as if the mountain itself disliked what had finally been uncovered. Ethan stood quietly in the dim lantern glow while the truth settled painfully into his chest. Noah had not hidden these recordings to haunt him. He hid them to protect him. Protect Rex too. The beacon signal, the coordinates, the buried files, all of it had been Noah's attempt to make sure Ethan remembered the truth before the signal buried it beneath fear forever. Ethan looked down slowly at the concrete floor under his boots. The dripping sound beneath them had stopped completely now. No more coded taps. No movement. Just silence. Yet Noah's warning remained carved into Ethan's mind. Do not dig below the cellar. Rex suddenly moved. Slowly, cautiously, the shepherd descended the final few stairs for the first time all night. Ethan watched him carefully. Rex approached the desk, then rested his nose gently against Noah's folded jacket before looking up at Ethan again. The dog's amber eyes looked softer now, not free of pain, just tired of carrying it alone. Ethan crouched beside him and buried one hand deep into the thick fur along his neck. I should have listened to you, he whispered. Rex leaned into him heavily. Outside, dawn finally began creeping faint blue through the storm clouds beyond the cabin windows. The worst of the snow had passed. Ethan realized suddenly that he could hear birds somewhere far outside in the trees. Morning returning slowly to the mountain. The recovery beacon on the desk emitted one final pulse before going dark forever. Battery exhausted. Ethan stared at the dead transmitter quietly. Something about its silence felt merciful now, like a wound finally closing after remaining open too long. He gathered Noah's jacket carefully and carried it upstairs while Rex followed close behind. The cabin no longer felt haunted, just heavy with memory. Ethan placed the jacket beside the fireplace and looked toward the old radio resting on the kitchen counter. The static was gone entirely now. No whispers, no false voices, only stillness. Rex walked to the front window and stared out toward the snowy forest. Sunlight slowly touched the tops of the pines in pale gold. Ethan moved beside him and rested a hand gently along the shepherd's back. Together, they stood there for a long moment watching morning arrive over the mountain. Then Rex did something he had not done in 11 months. He lifted his head slightly toward the light outside and released the faintest sound into the quiet cabin. Not a bark. Not yet. Just a small, fragile exhale that almost sounded like a voice trying to return home. 3 weeks later, the mountain finally thawed enough for the road crews to clear the upper pass leading into town. Winter loosened its grip slowly across western Montana, leaving behind rivers of melted snow that whispered through the pines like distant conversation. The cabin no longer felt buried beneath darkness. Sunlight reached the porch again in the mornings. Birds returned to the tree line. And for the first time in nearly a year, Ethan stopped sleeping with the lights on. Some wounds did not disappear. They simply learned how to breathe quieter. Rex spent most mornings beside the fireplace now, older than Ethan wanted to admit. The shepherd's muzzle had turned more silver than sable beneath the daylight, and his movements carried the careful stiffness of a body that remembered too many hard years. But something inside him had softened after that night. He no longer stared at empty corners, no longer trembled at static from passing trucks or weather radios. Sometimes, when Ethan spoke Noah's name aloud, Rex would simply close his eyes instead of leaving the room. It felt less like fear now, more like morning finally allowed to rest. Ethan had reported the abandoned beacon and the hidden recordings to the Marine Corps quietly through old contacts he still trusted. Recovery teams arrived 2 days later. They searched beneath the cabin cellar with ground scanners and excavation tools until sunset painted the snow gold across the mountain ridges. They found old drainage tunnels running deep beneath the property. Limestone caverns carrying strange acoustic echoes through the earth for miles. But they found no remains. No hidden bunker. No evidence that anyone else had ever stood beneath the cabin besides Ethan himself. Officially, Noah Mercer remained classified missing in action. The mountain kept its silence. Ethan never argued with the report. Some truths no longer needed proof. Late one afternoon, near the beginning of spring, Ethan drove into town with Rex, riding quietly beside him in the old pickup. The roads were wet from melting snow, reflecting pale clouds across the blacktop like broken mirrors. As they passed through the center of town, Ethan noticed workers placing new flags outside the small Veterans Memorial near the courthouse lawn. Memorial Day approached. Again, his chest tightened softly. He parked the truck beside the curb and stepped out into the cool mountain air, carrying Noah's challenge coin in his pocket. Rex followed close behind. Together they walked toward the memorial stone where names from different wars had been carved across polished granite beneath rows of American flags fluttering gently in the wind. Ethan stopped before Noah's name. For a long moment, neither he nor the dog moved. The afternoon sun filtered through pine branches overhead, warm against Ethan's face after months of cold. Finally, he crouched beside Rex and clipped Noah's tarnished coin carefully onto the shepherd's old tactical collar. The metal glinted softly beneath the light. "He stayed behind for both of us," Ethan whispered. Rex looked up at him slowly. Then something remarkable happened. A small boy crossing the memorial lawn with his mother broke free and wandered too close toward the busy street beside the courthouse. Ethan noticed the child too late. Tires hissed across wet pavement nearby. Voices shouted. But before Ethan could move, Rex reacted first. The old German shepherd sprinted forward with surprising speed, positioning himself between the child and the street in one smooth motion. Cars slowed instantly. The boy froze safely against Rex's side, while the shepherd stood watchful and calm beside him. Ethan's heart pounded hard as he rushed over. The child's mother reached them seconds later, breathless and shaken. "Thank you," she whispered repeatedly, tears bright in her eyes. Rex simply stood there quietly while the little boy wrapped tiny arms around his neck without fear. "Your dog is beautiful," the boy said softly. Ethan opened his mouth to answer. Then he stopped, because Rex had turned his head toward the mountains beyond town, where clouds drifted slowly above the distant snowcaps. The shepherd's ears lifted gently in the wind. And for one brief, impossible moment, Ethan could have sworn Rex was listening to someone far away. Then the dog released a single sound into the afternoon air. Not loud, not painful, just one deep bark carrying across the courthouse lawn before fading into the wind. Everyone nearby turned in surprise. The little boy smiled. But Ethan felt tears sting his eyes instantly because he understood what nobody else could. Rex had not forgotten how to bark. He had simply been waiting for something worth answering. Later that evening, after sunset painted the mountains blue and gold, Ethan sat alone with Rex on the cabin porch wrapped in quiet spring air. The radio inside the house remained silent now. Dead batteries, dead frequencies, peace at last. Yet as darkness slowly settled through the pines, the wind shifted softly across the valley below. And somewhere deep beneath the mountain, faint enough to almost be imagination, Ethan thought he heard the distant crackle of static drifting through the earth like a voice still trying to find its way home. On a frozen mountain in Montana, a wounded Marine and his loyal German Shepherd K9 are pulled back into the memories of a mission that never truly ended. When strange radio signals begin whispering through an abandoned cabin, the former soldier discovers hidden recordings, buried secrets, and a truth his dog has carried in silence for nearly a year. This emotional journey blends mystery, loyalty, trauma, and redemption into one of the most unforgettable animal stories you will ever hear. As the Marine uncovers what really happened inside Tunnel 9, his faithful K9 struggles with grief, fear, and the burden of protecting the man he once saved in war. Filled with cinematic atmosphere, quiet heartbreak, military brotherhood, and powerful human-animal connection, This story stands among the most emotional animal stories for viewers who believe love and loyalty can survive even the darkest memories. Through snowstorms, hidden signals, and haunting echoes beneath the mountains, the bond between a Marine and his German Shepherd becomes the soul of these deeply moving animal stories. Every moment is driven by suspense, emotional tension, and the silent courage of a dog who refused to abandon his partner. If you love heartfelt rescue dramas, military storytelling, faith-driven journeys, and unforgettable animal stories, this powerful tale of sacrifice and healing will stay with you long after the final scene fades. Sometimes the quietest souls carry the heaviest truths, and sometimes the deepest animal stories are not about survival alone, but about finally finding the strength to come home.